The air inside the abandoned branch bank hung thick and still, tasting of dust and the faint metallic tang of forgotten ambition. Sunlight, fractured by grimy windows, painted pale, shifting rhomboids across the scuffed linoleum floor, illuminating motes of a past you were paid to catalog. You, Dean, thrived in such environments, not for their history, but for the stark, undeniable numbers they presented. Chaos was an equation waiting to be solved, a ledger waiting to be balanced. Your life was a series of meticulously ordered spreadsheets, a symphony of cross-referenced data points. Your briefcase, a precisely packed toolkit of digital tablets, high-resolution cameras, and a stack of crisp, blank audit forms, was your shield against disorder. Today, your mission was to reconcile the physical assets of the defunct Sterling Trust Bank with its digitized legacy. A final forensic accounting before the wrecking ball or the renovators crew moved in. You moved through the silent lobby, your footsteps echoing unnaturally loud against the vaulted ceiling. The teller windows, once bustling, were now empty frames, like eyes staring blankly into a void. Your destination lay deeper, behind a formidable steel door that had once guarded the bank's most precious secrets, the safety deposit room. The vault door, an anachronism of polished chrome and riveted steel, swung open with a groan that seemed to pull from the building's very foundations. Inside, the air was even cooler, denser, a hermetically sealed pocket of the past. Rows upon rows of polished brass and steel safety deposit boxes gleamed faintly in the beam of your headlamp, stretching from floor to ceiling, a grid of dormant potential. Each box represented a promise, a secret, a fragment of someone's life, now merely an entry in a database. You set up your portable workstation on a small, wobbly table in the center of the room. Your tablet glowed, displaying the bank's digital manifest, a comprehensive list of every safety deposit box, its lease status, and any recorded access logs. Your task was straightforward. Physically verify each box against its digital record, noting any discrepancies. It was tedious work, the kind most people would find mind-numbing, but for you, it was a meditation, a dance of precision. You started at the top left, running your gloved fingers over the cool metal, checking numbers, cross-referencing. Boxes marked least active were visually inspected for any sign of tampering. Boxes marked least inactive, meaning the lease had expired and contents presumably retrieved, were verified as empty and sealed. And then, there were the unleased, never-activated boxes, the virgin territory, the blank slates. These should show no sign of use, no wear, no scuff. They should feel stiff, untouched, pristine. Hour after hour passed. The methodical rhythm of your work was broken only by the click of your camera as you documented a minor scratch or a misaligned number plate. You were deep into the third row, your eyes scanning the manifest for boxes 301 through 350. Box 311, you murmured, cross-referencing. Unleased, never activated. Physical check, pristine. You made a quick note on your tablet. You moved to 312. Unleased, never activated. You ran your finger along its brass plate. But something was off. Your thumb brushed against the keyhole. It wasn't stiff, not quite. There was a faint, almost imperceptible polish to the brass around the slot, a subtle sheen that wasn't present on the truly untouched boxes around it. You leaned closer, your headlamp casting a sharp beam. A microscopic swirl, like a fingerprint smudge long wiped away but leaving a ghost, caught the light. You frowned, tapping the box number on your tablet. No, the manifest was clear. 312, 313, 314, 315, 316, 317, 318. All listed as unleased, never activated. You moved to 313. Same thing. A fractional softening of the metal, a barely there dullness around the keyhole. You tried the mechanism. It wasn't locked, but the lever inside offered a fraction less resistance than a truly unused box. It was the difference between a new car door and one that had been opened and closed a few times. Then 314, and 315, and 316, and 317, and 318. 7 boxes in a row, all listed as never activated, yet all bearing the same subtle, almost invisible signs of prior interaction. It wasn't vandalism. It wasn't an attempted break-in. It was something far more subtle, more insidious to your orderly mind. It was use, where there should have been none. This wasn't a clerical error, a misplaced decimal point. This was a pattern. 7 consecutive boxes, all claiming to be virgin territory, yet all subtly compromised. It was a statistical anomaly that screamed for explanation. Your professional curiosity, usually a calm, logical engine, began to churn with an unfamiliar urgency. The numbers had just presented you with a question that had no immediate, neat answer. And for Dean, that was a deeply unsettling, yet undeniably intriguing proposition. You tapped your pen against your tablet, the sound sharp in the quiet. This wasn't merely an entry for the discrepancy report. This was something else entirely. You made a new note, a single stark line. Boxes 312, 318. Status unleased, never activated, contradicted by physical evidence of prior engagement. You moved with a new caution, your flashlight beam cutting through the dust motes dancing in the slivers of light from the grimy windows high above. The air was still, heavy, tasting of decay and something else. A subtle metallic tang that prickled your tongue. You remembered the old blueprints, the vault's dimensions, and a nagging detail you dismissed as an architect's quirk. A section of the wall that seemed thicker, heavier than the rest. Tapping the wall with a small hammer, you listened. The sound was flat, dead, devoid of resonance. Your heart gave a frantic jump. This wasn't just an old bank vault. It was a carefully constructed deception. You worked quickly, prying at a loose panel, the metal groaning in protest. You pulled it out, your flashlight beam illuminating a heavy, iron-bound ledger. It wasn't a standard bank book. Its leather cover was brittle with age, the pages yellowed and thick. No bank name, no dates on the spine. Just a single, crudely etched symbol. A circle with a jagged line through it. Opening it, you found not financial records, but a strange, looping script. The language wasn't immediately recognizable, but you could decipher a few words. Containment, the deep quiet, the entity. Your breath hitched. Page after page, the entries grew more frantic, almost desperate. Names were scrawled, then violently crossed out. Found him within, his mind taken, his body still. This was a prison. And whatever it held, whatever had been contained, was still here. The ledger confirmed it. The anomaly was sinister, a malevolent presence that had driven men mad and claimed lives. Later that evening, the ledger carefully wrapped and hidden. You called Mr. Eldridge. He was a retired bank archivist, a man who lived and breathed the forgotten histories of the city's financial institutions. A ledger, you say? Eldridge's voice crackled with an old man's enthusiasm over the phone. Hidden behind a false wall? Fascinating. A sealed trust, perhaps? I'll check the old files, Dean. Meet me at the library archives tomorrow morning. There's a box. Uncategorized anomalies. Pre-1950. That might hold something. You felt a flicker of hope. Eldridge, with his encyclopedic knowledge, could help unravel this. You spent the night poring over the ledger again, the cryptic symbols seeming to pulse in the dim light of your apartment. Police cruisers, their lights flashing, cordoned off the entrance. A small crowd had gathered, murmuring. You pushed through, your heart hammering against your ribs. Accident, a detective was saying to a reporter. Elderly man, Mr. Eldridge, fell from a ladder in the archives. Not an accident. Not after your call. You managed to get past the initial barrier, feigning concern as a distant relative. Inside, the archives were a scene of controlled chaos. You spotted the specific section Eldridge had mentioned. A heavy wooden ladder lay toppled. A specific, brittle yellow document was missing from the open, uncategorized anomalies pre-1950 box. The one Eldridge would have been looking for. The one that would have connected the dots. The world tilted. It wasn't an accident. It was a message. Someone knew you were digging. Someone had been listening. You had the ledger, a deadly secret in your possession. You were no longer just curious. You were implicated. You were a target. Without a second thought, you turned and walked away from the scene, blending into the crowd, your mind racing. The hunt was on, and you were the prey. You were on the run. The city's pulse thrummed around you, a deceptive lullaby after the chaos you just walked away from. You bypassed your primary residence, a place now undoubtedly watched, heading instead for a pre-arranged bolt hole, a small, nondescript apartment on the edge of the financial district, kept for emergencies. The street was quiet, too quiet for this time of night. A light rain had begun to fall, slicking the pavement, reflecting the neon glow of distant signs. As you reached the apartment building's entrance, a subtle anomaly snagged your attention. The faint scent of cheap cologne, not your own, lingered in the air, barely perceptible, like a ghost. Then, the almost imperceptible scuff mark on the doorframe, a fresh abrasion against old paint. They had been here. Your hand paused on the doorknob. The lock was untouched, a professional's work, rekeyed or bypassed with surgical precision. They weren't trying to break in. They were trying to send a message. You didn't need to see the ransacked interior to know. Your life, as you knew it, was a burning bridge behind you. Without a sound, you retreated, blending back into the rain-streaked anonymity of the street. You were hunted, and they knew your every move, every safe haven. This wasn't a warning. It was an eviction notice from your own existence. Your internal clock reset. Every second counted. You hailed a cab, giving a random address across town, then slipped out a block early, melting into an alleyway. You moved like a phantom, ditching your phone, buying a burner from a late-night kiosk, using cash you'd always kept hidden. The city was a vast, indifferent ocean, and you were a single drop trying to disappear. Hours later, the sky a bruised purple on the horizon, you found yourself standing before the skeletal remains of an abandoned branch bank. Its once grand facade was now crumbling, windows boarded up or shattered, a monument to forgotten wealth. This was it, the last resort, a place you and your colleague, Mark, had joked about using as a doomsday bunker, a location so overtly useless it would be overlooked. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic tang of decay. Graffiti marred the walls of the main lobby, and overturned desks lay like fallen soldiers. You navigated the labyrinthine corridors with a practiced ease, your flashlight beam cutting through the gloom, illuminating cobwebs and the ghosts of transactions long past. You found the vault, a massive steel door, its mechanism long since rusted shut, or so it seemed to the untrained eye. But Mark had trained you well. Not a rust-locked door, but a carefully re-secured one, designed to appear inoperable. You produced a small, specialized toolkit from your pack, your fingers working with practiced precision, listening to the soft clicks and thunks as tumblers realigned. The heavy door groaned open, revealing the safety deposit room. Rows upon rows of empty, numbered boxes lined the walls, a silent testament to secrets once held. Mark's instructions, given months ago over a clandestine coffee, suddenly snapped into focus. If anything ever happens to me and you feel the ground shifting beneath your feet, remember the old number, my lucky one, and the last thing we ever worked on together. The lucky number was 713. Your eyes scanned the rows until they landed on the brass plate marked 703. It was slightly different from the others, the edges of the plate a fraction of a millimeter wider, almost imperceptibly so. You pulled out a small, custom-made key Mark had given you years ago, disguised as a novelty bottle opener. It slid into the lock, turning with a soft click. The box wasn't empty. Inside lay a single tarnished silver locket, the kind a child might wear. And nestled beneath it, a folded piece of paper. Your fingers trembled as you opened the locket. It was heavy, far too heavy for its size. It wasn't silver, but a clever casing for a micro data chip. On its surface, etched with microscopic precision, was a stylized interlocking symbol. A compass rose merged with a gear, and beneath it, a single word. Architects. You unfolded the paper, not just a crack, but a systemic collapse. Their reach. It's not just a network, it's the very air we breathe. The data chip holds the first thread. Pull it. The Architects. The name, combined with the symbol and Mark's words, painted a picture of something vast, insidious, far beyond anything you had ever imagined. This wasn't a criminal enterprise. It was a global infrastructure of control hidden in plain sight. And you were already on the battlefield, the prey now tasked with hunting down the very architects of your world. You pocketed the locket and the note, the weight of them a sudden, immense burden. Mark hadn't just left you a clue. He'd handed you a war. Your mind raced, a frantic scramble for a name, a face, anyone who might understand the kind of labyrinth Mark had stumbled into. Only one person came to mind, a ghost from a past you'd tried to forget. Silas Blackwood. A former intelligence analyst, brilliant and obsessive, until his career imploded in a spectacular scandal involving unsubstantiated claims of a deep state cabal. But if anyone had ever brushed up against the kind of power Mark was talking about, it was Silas. Desperation gnawed at you. You found his last known address tucked away in the forgotten recesses of your old phone. A crumbling walk-up above a defunct laundromat, miles from anywhere respectable. The journey was a blur of paranoid glances, every passing car a potential tail, every pedestrian a possible watcher. The building sagged under the weight of decades of neglect. The air inside was thick with the scent of mildew and stale curry. 3 flights of creaking stairs led to a door that looked like it had been kicked in and poorly repaired a dozen times. No answer. You knocked again, harder, the urgency a raw knot in your throat. Finally, the door cracked open, revealing a sliver of a face, gaunt and etched with cynicism. His hair was long and unkempt, his eyes bloodshot behind thick-rimmed glasses. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in months. "What do you want?" His voice was raspy, laced with suspicion. "I don't buy magazines, I don't sign petitions, and I certainly don't believe in your truth." "Silas?" you asked, though you already knew it was him. "It's Dean. Dean Miller." His eyes narrowed, a flicker of something unreadable passing through them. "Dean, Mark's little protege. Last I heard, you were chasing ambulances, not ghosts." He started to close the door. "Mark's dead, Silas," you blurted out, catching the edge of the door with your foot. "And it wasn't an accident. He left me something." The door paused, then slowly, reluctantly, opened wider. He still looked wary, but a flicker of the old fire, the dangerous curiosity, sparked in his eyes. He motioned you inside with a curt nod. The apartment was a chaotic archive of paranoia. Stacks of old newspapers, conspiracy theory books, and printouts covered every surface. A corkboard on the wall was dense with crisscrossing red string connecting blurry photos and arcane symbols. The air was heavy with the smell of old paper and lukewarm coffee. "Architects, you say?" Silas scoffed, though the sound lacked conviction. He didn't offer you a seat, so you remained standing, the locket still warm in your hand. "That's an old ghost, one I tried to bury along with my career." "Mark didn't think it was a ghost," you said, pulling out the locket and the folded note. "He thought it was real. He left me this." You held out the locket, letting him see the intricate carving. He took it, his fingers tracing the pattern, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then he unfolded the note, reading Mark's hurried script. His jaw tightened. "Son of a bitch," he muttered, more to himself than to you. He actually found them. Found who, Silas? What are the architects? You pressed, your voice urgent. Mark said they were dangerous, that they were responsible for everything. Silas walked over to his corkboard, his eyes scanning the chaotic array of information. He picked up a worn pen and tapped it against a faded article about a corporate merger from 2 decades ago. The architects aren't a corporation, Dean. They're not a government agency, not a cartel, not even a traditional cabal with a secret handshake and a fancy logo. His voice dropped, taking on a grim, almost reverent tone. They're an idea, a network, a philosophy. Their modus operandi is elegance. They don't resort to crude violence unless absolutely necessary, and even then, it's always through proxies, deniable, untraceable. They prefer to dismantle, to discredit, to isolate. They sow discord, manipulate markets, influence policy, and reshape narratives. They make things happen that look like accidents, or natural consequences, or the inevitable outcome of a chain of events they meticulously set in motion. They don't leave fingerprints, Dean. They leave circumstances. They don't kill you. They orchestrate your downfall, your ruin, your public humiliation, until you either cease to be a threat or you take yourself out of the picture. They turn your allies against you, poison your reputation, strip away your resources, until you're left exposed and vulnerable. And when they do decide to remove someone, it's always made to look like something else entirely. A heart attack, a suicide, a tragic accident. Anything but their direct involvement. He tossed the locket back to you. This symbol, it's ancient. A mark of their influence, something they've used for centuries to identify certain assets or targets. Mark wasn't just investigating them, was he? He was getting too close. This wasn't a fight you could win with your fists. This was a battle of wits against an enemy that operated in the very fabric of society, unseen and untouchable. Silas gave a bitter laugh. Because Mark was a friend, in his own way. And because you're already caught in their current, Dean. Now you know what you're up against. A ghost that doesn't just haunt, but actively rewrites history. Every step you take, every person you talk to, could be a thread they've already laid. They don't just win, Dean. They make sure you never even know you were playing. He pointed to the door. Now get out, and forget you ever saw me. If they find out I even spoke to you, they'll finish what they started with me. You stumbled out of the apartment. The mystery hadn't been solved. It had only deepened, revealing an enemy far more insidious, more patient, and more terrifying than you could have ever imagined. You weren't just looking for Mark's killer. You were fighting an entire system designed to erase dissent without ever leaving a trace. You stumbled out of the apartment building, the locket a leaden ball in your pocket. The information Silas had given you a terrifying, crystalline truth. Silas, walking a few paces ahead, didn't look back. He'd agreed, after much argument, to take you to a place where he'd stashed some of his own research, a secure location he'd used before his world crumbled. The abandoned branch bank was a tomb of forgotten transactions. Silas led you around the back, to a service entrance marked by a rusted metal door. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of dust and decay. Your footsteps echoed in the vast, empty lobby, past teller windows boarded up like vacant eyes. Silas moved with the practiced ease of someone navigating a familiar, if desolate, landscape. He led you down a narrow, unlit corridor, then through another reinforced door that groaned in protest before yielding to his expertise. You stepped into the old safety deposit room. It was a vault within a vault, a steel behemoth with rows upon rows of empty, numbered boxes lining the walls. Silas didn't hesitate. He walked directly to a section near the back, pulling a small, powerful flashlight from his pocket. The beam cut through the gloom, illuminating a specific set of boxes, roughly in the middle. "Behind here," he muttered, his voice raspy. "There's a maintenance panel. They never bothered to check it when the bank closed. Too much steel, too much paperwork." He worked methodically, prying open a section of the wall that looked like solid, unyielding steel. With a grunt, a small, hidden compartment swung inward, revealing a compact, custom-built server rack. Wires snaked like digital veins, and a small, robust monitor sat nestled amidst the hardware. It hummed softly, a faint blue light indicating it was still powered, running on a concealed battery backup. Silas connected a laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard with an almost surgical precision. Lines of code scrolled down the screen, an indecipherable language that held the keys to everything. The locket felt heavier than ever, a stark reminder of the personal cost that had led you here. "This is it," Silas said, his eyes glued to the screen. "Everything I managed to salvage before they came for me. Everything I could cross-reference, verify." The screen flickered, then resolved into a series of interconnected diagrams. Names, dates, locations, all linked by a web of colored lines. It wasn't a simple database. It was a living, breathing organism of information. "The architects," Silas began, his voice low. "They're not a company, not a government agency. A select few, operating outside the visible spectrum of power. They don't just influence events, Dean, they sculpt them." He zoomed in on a section. "Look here, the 70s oil crisis, not just market forces. Look at the key players, the financial transactions, the discrete meetings in Geneva. The architects orchestrated the panic, then profited from the recovery. Or this," he pointed to another cluster. "The collapse of the Soviet Union, not just internal pressures. Key figures within the Politburo funneling information, manipulating public opinion, all under their unseen hand. They didn't want a single monolithic superpower. They wanted a fragmented world, easier to manage, easier to exploit." Your mind reeled. These weren't isolated incidents. Financial institutions, media conglomerates, think tanks, all had been subtly infiltrated, their resources bent to the architect's will. "They play the long game," Silas continued, his voice tight with a suppressed fury. "They don't seek power for its own sake, but for the leverage it provides, to shape human civilization towards their own twisted vision of order. And they eliminate anyone who threatens that order, anyone who even glimpses their methods." He navigated to a new set of files, the screen filling with recent intelligence. Encrypted communications, satellite imagery, leaked documents, a terrifying mosaic of current operations. A sense of overwhelming scale washed over you. Your initial quest, your personal tragedy, suddenly felt microscopic against this backdrop of global manipulation. Then, Silas's fingers froze. His eyes widened, fixing on a newly decrypted file. A series of images flashed across the screen. A motorcade, a private jet, a security detail. And then, a face. A face recognized by billions. It can't be. On the screen wasn't a minor functionary, not a CEO of some obscure corporation. It was the President of the United Nations General Assembly, currently brokering a groundbreaking global climate accord. An accord that would reshape international trade and energy policies for generations. "They're not just targeting a political movement, Dean," Silas said, looking at you, his face pale. "They're targeting the very architect of the world's future. If this accord goes through, it upends too many of their established power structures. If he falls, the world descends into chaos, and they'll be there, ready to pick up the pieces, to reshape it in their image once more." The locket in your pocket felt like a child's toy. The scope of their ambition, their audacity, was not just terrifying. It was absolute. And you, Dean, had just stumbled into the eye of their coming storm. The locket in your pocket felt like a child's toy. Your vendetta against the architects, once a burning inferno, was now a single ember in the face of everything. This meeting, in this forgotten shell of a bank, was your desperate gamble to fan it back into flame. You pushed through the heavy, grimy double doors of the abandoned branch, the clang echoing like a gunshot in the cavernous, dust-choked lobby. The air was thick with the scent of mildew and decay. You moved with a practiced stealth, your hand instinctively going to the small, encrypted data chip tucked into your jacket lining. The true prize. The digital transcription of the locket's secrets, amplified by your own relentless digging. Down a narrow, unlit hallway, you found the vault door. It stood ajar, a gaping maw of rusted steel. You slipped inside, into the old safety deposit room. The space was eerily silent, illuminated only by a single bare bulb hanging precariously from a frayed wire, casting a sickly yellow glow on rows of empty, open boxes. Some were still numbered, faded tags flapping in the imperceptible draft. It was the broker, a man you'd known for years, a ghost in the system, renowned for his ability to acquire anything and disappear anyone. You'd trusted him with your life more than once. His face, usually a mask of detached professionalism, seemed subtly different tonight, a flicker of something you couldn't quite place. You're punctual. Good. You kept your distance, your eyes scanning the room, the years of paranoia making you twitchy. "I have it," you said, your voice tight. You pulled out the chip, holding it between your thumb and forefinger. It contained everything: names, dates, financial ledgers, the proof of the architect's deepest manipulations. It was your leverage, your weapon. The broker's gaze fixed on the chip. "And you expect what, exactly, for this treasure?" "The decryption keys, the secure upload, the truth, out there beyond their reach," you countered, taking a step closer. "And a new identity, a new life, for me, and for anyone I choose to bring with me." He let out a dry, humorless chuckle. "Ambitious, and you trust me to deliver all that?" "I always have." You extended the chip. "No, Dean, I haven't." He took a step forward, his hand reaching out. For a split second, you felt a surge of relief, that ember of hope flickering brighter. Then, his hand didn't take the chip. Instead, it closed around your wrist, his grip surprisingly strong, iron hard. "But there's a first time for everything," he finished, his voice no longer a rasp, but a crisp, clear declaration. Betrayal, sharp and agonizing, pierced through you. You tried to pull away, but his grip was unyielding. From the corners of the room, from behind the very rows of safety deposit boxes you'd meticulously checked, figures emerged. 3 of them, faceless in tactical gear, moving with the predatory grace of trained hunters. The architects. They were here. The broker twisted your arm, forcing your hand open. The chip, your crucial evidence, tumbled from your fingers. One of the operatives, the largest of the 3, caught it deftly in midair. He gave a curt nod to the broker, who finally released your wrist. "It wasn't personal, Dean," the broker said, stepping back, putting distance between you and him. "Just business. They made a better offer." You lunged, a desperate animalistic roar tearing from your throat, but the 3 operatives were faster. They moved in concert, a well-oiled machine. A kick to your gut doubled you over, stealing your breath. Another struck your temple, sending stars exploding behind your eyes. You stumbled, crashing into a stack of empty deposit boxes, the metal clattering loudly. Disoriented, you tasted blood. Your head throbbed. This wasn't just about capturing you. It was about humiliation, about breaking you. It was gone. Everything you'd risked, everything you'd fought for, lost in an instant. They closed in, forming a tight circle. Your escape route was cut off. You were cornered, trapped in the very heart of their victory. But Dean, you were a survivor. Even with the crushing weight of betrayal and the loss of your last hope, a primal instinct surged. You saw the loose wire of the bare bulb above, just within reach. With a desperate surge of adrenaline, you leaped, grabbing the wire. A jolt of electricity surged through you as you ripped it from its socket. Chaos erupted. Shouts, the scramble of heavy boots. You heard the distinct thump of one of the operatives stumbling. Using the brief disorientation, you crashed through a row of deposit boxes, the metallic screech a cover for your desperate scramble. A hand grabbed your ankle, but you kicked out wildly, connecting with something soft. You heard a grunt of pain. You didn't stop. You didn't look back. You burst out of the vault, ignoring the burning in your lungs, the throbbing in your head. Up the stairs, through the lobby, out into the cool night air. The chip was gone. The architects had your evidence, and they knew you were still out there. They weren't just closing in. They had already found you, and now they were hunting. Dust motes danced in the anemic light filtering through a grimy vent high above, illuminating the empty open compartments lining the walls. The broker, the one man you thought you could trust, had sold you out. Not hunger, though that gnawed too, but the devastating emptiness of absolute betrayal. Your breath hitched, a ragged, involuntary gasp. Rage coiled hot and tight in your chest, a desperate, futile fury. You wanted to scream, to lash out, to break something. But there was nothing to break but yourself, and you were already shattered. The architects had won. They always did. They were an unseen current, sweeping away anyone who dared to stand against them, erasing them from existence with surgical precision. Soon, you'd be just another ghost in their vast, invisible network. Another name scrubbed, another life extinguished. The thought was a lead weight in your stomach, dragging you down into a suffocating despair. There was no escape, no allies, no hope. You closed your eyes, pressing the heels of your hands into your burning sockets, trying to blot out the bleak reality. So much data. Even without the chip, the information was seared into your mind, a terrifying mosaic of their power. It was in that moment of utter desolation, as your mind replayed the endless stream of data, that something shifted. A flicker. A pattern. You'd been so focused on what the architects did, the manipulation, the assassinations, the financial ghosting, that you'd missed the how. Their operations weren't chaotic. They were orchestrated with a terrifying, almost ritualistic precision. There was a rhythm to their grander schemes, a predictable pulse beneath the surface chaos they so expertly generated. You started tracing the lines in your mind, connecting the seemingly disparate threads. The data from the chip, the scattered intelligence you'd gathered, even the small, seemingly random events you'd witnessed firsthand. A specific type of global financial market fluctuation always preceded their major asset transfers. A particular international summit or a highly publicized political scandal would invariably coincide with their most aggressive cleanup operations. The systematic erasure of individuals. It wasn't just about the content of the data. It was about the context in which it was deployed. Their method wasn't to hide everything, but to hide their specific actions within a larger, unavoidable public noise. They didn't just disappear people. They made sure the world was looking elsewhere when they did it. And then it hit you. The broker, the chip, your current predicament. It all fit. You were about to be disappeared, not randomly, but according to their established protocol. The architects weren't invincible. They were predictable. And predictability, in the right hands, was a weakness. If they operated on a schedule, if they followed a script, then you could anticipate their next move. You could use their own pattern against them. The data that had almost gotten you killed, the very information they wanted buried forever, now became your weapon. You no longer had the physical chip, but you had the understanding of its contents. You had the pattern. Your plan began to form, raw and brutal, a last suicidal gamble. You wouldn't just leak the data, you would expose their method. You would become the live demonstration of their meticulous, horrifying process. You would leverage the imminent threat to yourself, the very act of your own disappearance, as undeniable proof. You would make it public, not through a quiet leak, which they would easily smother, but through a high-risk, high-impact exposure that would force the world to look. You remembered a failsafe you'd built years ago, a digital dead man switch buried deep within an obscure, encrypted network. A packet of highly sensitive, corroborated data designed to release if you failed to check in for a predetermined period. It was a contingency for a different kind of threat, but it could be repurposed. The architects were preparing to erase you. You would let them, but before they could complete their work, you would trigger the switch. The risk was astronomical. If you miscalculated, if they moved faster, if they found you before you could initiate the final sequence, you would be just another anonymous victim. But if you succeeded, if you could make enough noise, if you could provide just enough evidence to expose their predictable pattern, their entire invisible empire would begin to crumble. It was a desperate plan, a high-stakes game of chicken with the most powerful secret organization on the planet. You were alone, you were hunted, but you were no longer adrift. You had a target and a plan. And for the first time since the broker's betrayal, you had a chance. The air hung heavy with dust and the metallic tang of decay. Your shoulders screamed from the fall, but the adrenaline surging through you was a potent anesthetic. This room, a forgotten vault, was supposed to be the first key. Each step was calculated, each breath held, as you navigated the silent, echoing space. The safety deposit boxes, rows of empty steel compartments, stretched into the gloom. You knew which one. It wasn't the box itself, but what was behind it. Inside, nestled among forgotten dust and cobwebs, was a single ruggedized data drive. Your fingers closed around it, the weight a promise and a burden, the first piece of irrefutable public-facing proof. A low thrum vibrated through the floorboards. Not a distant train, but something heavier, closer. Already. How? Your heart hammered against your ribs. You spun, the drive clutched tight. The main vault door, a behemoth of steel, groaned. They weren't coming through the front. They were inside. No time to think. They were anticipating your moves, closing the net. You burst through a service exit, the alarm a silent scream in your head, though no siren wailed. They didn't want attention. They wanted you. A sleek black sedan screeched to a halt at the alley's mouth, blocking your path. Another appeared behind you, its engine a low growl. Trapped. But you weren't out of options. A rusty dumpster provided a launch pad, sending you scrambling over a brick wall. You landed hard on the other side, rolling to absorb the impact, then sprinted. The roar of powerful engines echoed as the sedans peeled around the block, anticipating your direction. You ducked into a maze of back alleys, leaping fences, scrambling over overflowing bins. The data drive a burning ember in your pocket. You needed a vehicle. Fast. A delivery van, keys still in the ignition, idled at a loading dock, its driver nowhere in sight. A reckless grab, a silent prayer. You were in, engine revving, tires squealing as you tore away, leaving the pursuit cars momentarily confused, their precision momentarily disrupted by your desperation. Your next target. The towering glass edifice of Kronos Corp, a nexus of the architect's financial operations. This wasn't about data extraction. It was about data injection. The drive held the raw proof. Kronos held the conduits to broadcast it. You parked the stolen van blocks away, shedding the delivery uniform for a nondescript suit you'd stashed earlier. The building's security was formidable, but you knew its weak points. Service entrances, overlooked maintenance tunnels. You slipped in, a ghost in the machine, ascending through the building's arteries, bypassing cameras, bypassing biometric locks with cloned credentials, making your way to the executive servers on the 30th floor. The server room hummed, a cool, sterile environment. You plugged the drive into a console, initiating the upload. The progress bar crawled. Every second stretched into an eternity. This wasn't just data. It was a truth bomb, primed to detonate across their carefully constructed empire. Then, the lights flickered. A low hum, different from the servers, vibrated through the floor. The architects were here. Again. They weren't just anticipating. They were reacting with terrifying speed, their reach seemingly limitless. The network access, your escape route, began to throttle. They were trying to cut you off. You saw the percentage creep towards completion. 87%, 91%, the crucial data, the irrefutable evidence, flowing into their own public channels. A heavy thud reverberated from the corridor. They were breaching the outer door. The upload hit 99%. No time to wait for 100%. You plunged into the labyrinthine corridors, alarms now blaring throughout the building. Security guards, now alerted, joined the hunt. You became a blur, a phantom, vaulting over desks, sliding under closing doors. You burst onto a lower-level parking garage, the screech of tires and the glare of headlights your only welcome. Two black SUVs, identical to the ones from the bank, were already there, engines idling, ready to box you in. You didn't hesitate. You spotted an old, beat-up sedan, its driver struggling with a flat tire. A flash of desperation, a swift, practiced move. You wrenched open the door, startling the bewildered driver, shoved him out, and slammed your foot on the accelerator. The sedan lurched forward, a metallic cough, then roared to life, spitting gravel as you swerved past the architect's vehicles. Shots rang out, pinging off the rear of the car. The proof was out there, trickling into the public domain. But you were far from safe. You had bought yourself mere moments, but moments were all you had left to make them count. You wrenched the sedan's door open. The startled cry of the driver a fleeting echo as you slid behind the wheel, the keys already in your hand. The flat tire was a gift, a momentary distraction, a small window of opportunity you'd seized without a second thought. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. You navigated the cavernous lobby, past overturned desks and splintered chairs, your flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The real sanctuary was deeper, beyond a rusted gate and down a narrow corridor, the old safety deposit room. The heavy vault door, surprisingly intact, groaned on its hinges as you pushed it open, revealing a smaller, more intimate space. Rows of empty, open boxes lined the walls, silent witnesses to countless forgotten treasures. This was your war room, your sanctuary, your last stand. You set down your worn backpack, the weight of its contents, your laptop, a secure satellite phone, a handful of burner devices, a familiar comfort. The architects had a pattern, a signature woven into their elaborate tapestry of control. They thrived on grand gestures, on public displays of their invisible power. They didn't just manipulate events, they staged them, always leaving a tantalizing, almost arrogant clue for those clever enough to find it. It was a beacon of order they would inevitably seek to disrupt, a symbol of stability they would delight in shattering. You had studied their methodology, their psychological profile. They wanted the world to know they were responsible, without ever truly revealing themselves. This summit wasn't just another target. It was their stage, and you were about to steal the spotlight. Your plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. You wouldn't just expose their crimes, you would expose them by turning their own theatricality against them. You would use their predictable craving for a spectacle to lure them into a trap. Not a physical trap, but an informational one. Hours bled into one another as your fingers flew across the keyboard. You were building the broadcast, a meticulously crafted digital bomb. It wasn't a leak. It was an invitation. You would compile every piece of evidence you had. The encrypted communications, the financial trails, the schematics of their past operations, the undeniable links to the summit. You would narrate it, a calm, damning voice laying bare their intricate web of corruption and control. But the real bait wasn't just the exposure of their crimes, it was the public challenge. You would announce, live, that at the height of the summit's opening ceremony, you would broadcast this information, exposing not just what they did, but who they were. Or at least, the mechanisms of their operation, the names of their key operatives, the extent of their reach. You would dare them to stop you. You would give them a specific time, a specific platform, a specific threat. The architects, you muttered to the empty safety deposit boxes, your voice hoarse. You love to watch the world burn, but you hate to be seen lighting the match. You knew they would be listening. They were everywhere. They had eyes and ears in every corner of the digital world. The moment your challenge went live, they would move. They wouldn't tolerate such a direct affront, such a public unmasking. They would come for you. You checked the secure satellite phone, its battery indicator glowing green. Your connection to the outside world, to the platform you'd secured, was tenuous but robust. You practiced your delivery, the rhythm of your voice, the cadence of your accusations. There could be no hesitation, no doubt. Every word had to land with the force of a hammer blow. You ran through the contingencies. What if the broadcast was jammed? What if your location was compromised? What if they found you before the signal went out? You had backup plans, dead man switches, protocols to ensure the information, even if you fell, would still find its way into the light. But you preferred to be alive to see their empire crumble. You had done everything you could. The trap was set. The bait was irresistible. The weight of the coming confrontation settled upon you, a heavy cloak of inevitability. You were no longer just tracking the architects. You were confronting them face to face on a stage of your own making. The game was no longer about evasion. It was about exposure. And you knew, with absolute certainty, that they were already on their way. The sterile air of the convention center was a stark contrast to the dust and decay of the vault. You moved through the throng, a ghost among the titans of industry and media, the hum of ambition and self-congratulation a dull roar in your ears. Tonight, the global Blake Claire Mia was their stage, and Director Thorne, the polished face of the architects, was poised to deliver his magnum opus. You had spent the last 48 hours a blur of adrenaline and caffeine, deciphering the last of the encrypted files, cross-referencing names, dates, and transactions. The evidence, now condensed into a single, irrefutable package, hummed in your pocket. A small, modified broadcast device, ready to hijack the summit's global feed. The weight of the truth, of their insidious plan, settled heavy in your gut. From your vantage point in the upper gallery, you watched Thorne stride to the podium, his smile a practiced mask of benevolent power. The spotlight caught the silver in his hair, the expensive cut of his suit. He began to speak, his voice a soothing balm, promising stability, prosperity, a future free from economic uncertainty. The lies dripped like honey, sweet and poisonous. Your heart hammered against your ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising crescendo of Thorne's speech. He was nearing the crux, the moment he would unveil their grand design. You took a deep breath, the metallic taste of anticipation sharp on your tongue. As Thorne gestured to the massive screens behind him, revealing sleek graphics of their new framework, you moved. Not to the stage, not yet. Your target was the broadcast booth, a glass-enclosed cubicle tucked away near the back of the hall, buzzing with technicians. Security was tight, but predictable. You found the access panel, a familiar sight from your days in network security. A silent click, a flash of green light from your device. The main feed was yours. You didn't need to be on stage to expose them. You just needed to be heard. Back in the main hall, Thorne's voice boomed. And with the launch of the Ares Protocol, we usher in an age of unprecedented transparency and equity. Just as the applause began to swell, A jarring static ripped through the sound system. On every screen, Thorne's triumphant face flickered, replaced by a stark white text on a black background. Confidential. The Architects. Project Ares Protocol. Internal Audit. A collective gasp swept through the room, quickly followed by murmurs of confusion. Thorne's smile faltered, his eyes darting to the screens, then to the broadcast booth. He saw you, a fleeting glimpse as you activated the next sequence. The text dissolved, replaced by a rapid-fire succession of documents. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, encrypted communications. All detailing the true nature of the Ares Protocol. Not a solution, but a global financial enslavement designed to consolidate wealth and power into the hands of the Architects. Names flashed across the screen. Thorne and others. Dates, amounts, directives. The vault's secrets laid bare for the world. Panic ignited. The murmurs erupted into shouts. People stood pointing, their faces a mix of horror and outrage. Thorne roared, "Cut the feed! Get him!" Security swarmed. You didn't wait. Your device had done its work. The truth was out. Now survival. You bolted from the broadcast booth, weaving through the surging crowd. The hall was a maelstrom of bodies, a stampede of the powerful and the terrified. Chairs overturned, tables crashed, glasses shattered. You heard the shouts of Thorne's enforcers, their voices cutting through the din. "Dean, stop him!" A burly guard, built like a brick wall, lunged. You ducked under his arm, using his momentum against him, sending him sprawling into a dessert cart. Cakes and pastries exploded in a sticky mess. The chase was frantic, a blur of polished marble and terrified faces. You burst through a set of double doors, finding yourself in the labyrinthine service corridors once more. Footsteps pounded behind you, closer now. You heard Thorne's voice, surprisingly close, laced with fury. You rounded a corner, skidding to a halt. Thorne stood there, blocking your path, not alone. Two more guards flanked him, their faces grim. Thorne's usual composure had evaporated, replaced by a mask of incandescent rage. "You think you've won, Dean?" Thorne snarled, his eyes burning. "You've only signed your death warrant." Before he could finish, you moved. The element of surprise was your only advantage. You launched yourself at closest to Thorne, a blur of motion. A swift kick to the knee, a jab to the throat. He crumpled, gasping. The second guard hesitated, momentarily stunned. Thorne, however, was no stranger to a fight, or at least to ordering them. He barked a command, but you were already on the move, closing the distance. You didn't aim for a knockout, just disruption. A hard shove sent him stumbling back, crashing into a stack of empty crates. The remaining guard recovered, swung a fist. You ducked, feeling the whoosh of air past your ear. You countered with an elbow to his jaw, then spun, grabbing a fire extinguisher from its wall mount. The heavy metal canister became a makeshift shield, then a weapon. You swung it, connecting with Ez's side with a sickening thud. He staggered, winded. Thorne, scrambling to his feet, pulled something from his jacket, a small, gleaming pistol. He wasn't playing games. "This ends now, Dean," he hissed, leveling the weapon. Just then, a wave of panic from the main hall surged through the corridor. A fire alarm blared, its shrill cry adding to the chaos. You dropped the extinguisher, adrenaline coursing through you. Thorne fired. The shot echoed deafeningly in the confined space, tearing a chunk from the wall beside your head. You dove, rolling behind a large catering trolley. Another shot, then another. People screamed. The Architect's power play had been stopped, but the cost was becoming devastatingly clear. The chase wasn't over. The fight had just begun. The sound of breaking glass somewhere down the corridor. The collateral damage was mounting. You were cornered in the old safety deposit room, the air thick with dust and the metallic tang of gunpowder. "Dean." A voice devoid of human warmth cut through the din. You have nowhere left to run. But you weren't running. Not anymore. You were a cornered animal, and you'd learned enough about this place, about them, to know that sometimes the only way out was through. Your gaze flicked to the heavy, rusted lever on the main vault door, then to the exposed wiring near the ceiling, frayed and sparking from an earlier skirmish. As the architect raised their weapon, you lunged, not at them, but at the cart. With a desperate shove, you sent it careening into a stack of old ledger books, creating a cloud of paper dust and a cacophony of falling metal. It was a distraction, crude but effective. The architect hesitated, their shot going wide, embedding itself in the steel wall with a dull thud. In that precious second, you scrambled towards the main vault door. Your fingers, slick with sweat, fumbled for the enormous lever. It was stiff, resistant, years of disuse cementing its position. You put your entire weight into it, grunting with effort. The architect, recovering, fired again. Then, with a groan that seemed to echo from the very foundations of the bank, the lever gave way. The massive vault door, designed to withstand armies, began to swing inward, revealing the narrow corridor beyond. It wasn't an escape route. It was a weapon. "Fool!" the architect snarled, rushing forward, realizing your intent. You pulled, pushed, gritted your teeth. The door, moving with agonizing slowness, created a funnel, a bottleneck. As the architect closed the distance, you gave one final, desperate heave. The door slammed shut with a thunderous crack, not fully closing but trapping the architect's arm between the heavy steel and the reinforced frame. A choked cry of pain erupted, raw and human. The weapon clattered to the floor. You scrambled over the fallen cart, past the incapacitated architect, their face contorted in agony, their plans shattered along with their bone. You burst out into the main bank hall. Chaos. Sirens wailed, closer now, a chorus of approaching justice. Your actions, your desperate gamble, had bought enough time, caused enough disruption. You were a name on a file, of interest. The detective, a weary man named Miller, looked at you with a mixture of respect and pity. "You did good, Dean," he'd said, "but you made some powerful enemies. You vanished. Not in a blaze of glory, but quietly, meticulously. Your apartment was abandoned, your phone number changed, your old job, a distant memory. You learned to live off the grid, to blend into the hum of anonymous cities. You picked up skills you never thought you'd need. Observation, self-defense, the art of being forgettable. Your new normal was built on a foundation of vigilance. You found a quiet place, a small town nestled by a river, far from the concrete labyrinths where the architects thrived. You worked odd jobs, cash in hand, never staying in one place too long, never leaving a digital footprint. You weren't paranoid, not exactly, but you were aware. You checked your rearview mirror a little too often. You noticed the subtle patterns in crowds, the way people walked, the flicker of recognition in a stranger's eyes. You knew the architects weren't entirely destroyed. Their ideology, their network, was too vast, too deeply rooted. You'd crippled a significant cell, perhaps even a major regional leader, but the Hydra had many heads. Sometimes late at night you'd trace the scars on your hands, reminders of the steel and grit of that vault. You were no hero. Your new life was quiet, almost peaceful. The river flowed, seasons changed, and the world moved on. But for you, Dean, the world was forever altered. You lived in a fragile normal, a temporary calm before the inevitable storm. You knew they were out there, and they knew you were too. The game wasn't over. It had merely entered a new, more insidious phase.